All right, very good. Good evening, everyone. I'm John Goldberg. I'm going to be the hearing officer for tonight's hearing. So I thank you for participating. I work at Public Works and am assigned to the ESER, the Earthquake Safety Bond Project. And so I'll be the hearing officer. My job as the hearing officer is to take the information from both the department and from the public and any public comments, appellants and things, and then write it up as best I can, present it to the director. Ultimately, it's the director's decision to accept, reject, or modify any recommendations I might make. So the way the hearing will proceed is I'll ask the department to present first, and then after the department presents, we'll ask for the appellant or to speak, and then there'll be an opportunity for any members of the public to speak. This is a new format for Public Works. We had a tree hearing a few weeks ago, and it was challenging at best for everyone involved. The department heard the concerns of everyone and has now gone to this new format. So I ask you to be patient with us as we work through this, and we will be patient with you. I think formally, people are allowed 3 minutes for a presentation, but my thought is that if you take the time to be here and speak, we should give you reasonable time, and we will do so. I just ask that especially if you're early in the agenda, that you be respectful of the time for those that, are much later in the agenda. And I do maintain the prerogative to ask you to hurry up or close up if I think that we're really not moving along or adding anything new to the discussion. So that I do want to say that the hearing is being recorded, so there'll be an opportunity to review it if that's necessary. I want to thank Charisse Waiters, who is our clerk today, who's managing the background and all of the video and conferences and things. So thank you, Charisse. For those of you who are calling in, if you want to speak, if you push *9, it will raise your hand and we'll know that you want to speak on this issue. So we will call you. And for those of you that are attending on Zoom, I believe at the bottom of the participants list, there's a little thing where you can push the button and raise your hand, and I will call on you and ask you to speak. So with that, when people do speak, I ask you to identify yourself, and then if you would spell your name for the record, please, because when I write it up for the director, I like to put the person's name in, and I make every effort to spell it correctly. So I'm not always very good at it. So if you would state your name and spell it so that it can be recorded appropriately, I would appreciate it. With that, I think that is it. Let me just read something, just an official thing. In accordance with the governor's statewide order for all residents to shelter in place and the numerous local and state proclamations, orders, and supplemental directions regarding the COVID-19 virus, the Public Works hearings are held through video conferencing, and we will provide for remote public comment. So with that, we have 10 items on the hearing tonight. So I'll call the first item. Does the department want to make a presentation? And please identify yourself.
Correct. Good evening. This is Chris Buck, Urban Forester with San Francisco Public Works, Bureau of Urban Forestry. And we have 10 items this evening. We often will read through the agenda items at the start of the hearing. I think we may want to go through that process, a reading through of the 10 agenda items.
Sure. Would you like me to do it, or do you want to do it?
Typically, we'd have the hearing officer read that.
Very good. All right. Item number 2 is order number 203-528, 31 Abbey Street, to consider removal of one significant tree on private property without replacement. Staff approved the removal, and the public has protested. Item number 3 on the agenda, order number 203-529, 145 6th Avenue, to consider removal of one street tree with replacement. Staff approved the removal, and the public has protested. Item number 4 on the agenda, Order number 203530, 1550 Evans Avenue, the New Southeast Community Center, to consider removal of 28 trees on 3 frontages, 3rd Street, Evans Avenue, and Newhall Street, with replacement of 36 trees. Staff approved the removal and the public has protested. Order number 5, or excuse me, agenda item number 5, order number 203531, 3937 21st Street, to consider removal of 1 significant tree on private property with replacement. Staff approved the removal and the public has protested. Item number 6 on the agenda, order number 203532, 2727 Pier Street, to consider removal of 2 significant palm trees on private property with replacement. Staff approved the removal of 1 palm tree and the public has protested. Order number 203533, 366 San Carlos Street, to consider removal of 2 significant palm trees on private property without replacement. Staff approved the removal and the public has protested. Item number 8, order number 203534, 801 Sanchez Street, to consider removal of 2 significant trees on private property with replacement. Staff approved the removal and the public has protested. Item number 9, order number 2035352. Looks like too many numbers here. I'll correct that. 555 Diamond Street, to consider removal of 1 street tree with replacement of a 25-foot red maple. Staff approved the removal and the public has protested. Item number 10, order number 203536, 161 28th Avenue, to consider removal of 2 street trees with replacement. Staff approved the removal and the public has protested. Item number 11, order number 203537, 646th Avenue, to consider removal of 1 street tree with replacement adjacent to 5455 Anza Street. Staff approved the removal and the public has protested. So that concludes the reading of the agenda. So with that, can we move to item number 2, 31 Abbey Street?
Good evening. This is Chris Buck, urban forester with San Francisco Public Works, Bureau of Urban Forestry. And then one, as you noted, Officer Goldberg, ordered agenda item 9. There's just a space is in the wrong location. It's order 203535. And then the address is 2555 or 2555 Diamond Street. So just to bring that to everyone's attention.
Very good, thank you.
Yep, thank you. So yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Buck, and I'll be representing staff this evening. And I'll be sharing my screen often and going through a PowerPoint for each of the cases to sort of introduce the public, the hearing officer, and the applicants to each item, and talking a little bit about our thought process in evaluating a tree for removal, whether that tree was initiated for removal by Public Works or initiated for removal by a property owner. And one of the things you'll hear us say often this evening is that our general principle is to retain trees that are relatively healthy and sustainable, because mature trees provide far greater benefits than young and very small street trees. So you'll hear that a lot. You'll also hear right tree, right place. We have a few cases this evening where trees are really in very limited growing space. So you'll hear us talk about that as well. And then one other item is regarding replacement trees. I just want to clarify that whenever a tree is removed, our code, Article 16 of the Urban Forestry Ordinance, directs that a replacement tree shall be replanted. But the planting site needs to meet our planting guidelines established by our director's order, which establishes the guidelines for the planting and maintenance of street trees. So when we say the tree will be replaced, that is not left up to an individual staff person. That's the whim of a mood or how they're feeling that day. It's literally based on very specific criteria, very specific measurements from 20 to 30 pieces of utility or furniture within the right of way. And so we'll say that a lot, with replacement, without. Our staff are ISA certified arborists, and they're always evaluating every site to determine if the tree location can be replanted as is. And if it can't be, can it be shifted to a few squares, sidewalk squares away, or would it have to move to a different frontage in the immediate vicinity? So it's something we're always doing, even though I may not be stating that again and again with each of these cases. So it's not just a goodwill feeling, replacement trees. It's a code requirement, and we're always mindful of that. With that, yes, thank you for everyone's patience, and I'll begin sharing my screen with the first item, and we'll pull that up. And let me get this to the current item. So again, this is order 203528, the removal of one significant tree without replacement at 31 Abbey Street. And I just want to confirm that you can continue to hear my audio and see the PowerPoint.
We can hear you. I can hear you fine.
Okay, thank you. My viewer mode is got everything blocked out except for the PowerPoint. So again, this is the removal of one significant tree on private property without replacement. Staff approved the removal and the public protested during the 30-day public notification period. Here's an image of the subject tree. It's a Ficus microcarpa nitida, or ficus tree, located, it's on private property, but within 10 feet of a public right-of-way. And I just want to state, we have a few cases this evening with other examples of significant trees. A significant tree is a tree that's on private property, but within 10 feet of a public right-of-way, that also meets at least one of three size criteria. And that's a height in excess of 20 feet, a canopy greater than 15 feet, and a trunk diameter greater than 12 inches at 4.5 feet above grade. And a tree only needs to achieve one of those three size criteria to be considered significant. And what that means is that up until 2006, trees on private property were not under a city jurisdiction and could be removed without a permit. However, our code was amended to have trees that are near the right-of-way, that are benefiting the right-of-way and providing value and benefits to the neighborhood, to have a tree removal process that's similar to the street tree removal process. And so we have the tree go through that similar process as if it's a street tree. So a sidewalk tree, regardless of size, is not considered a significant tree, only trees on private property. So we received an application from the property owner. It's permit number 784-833. And the primary reason for removal on the application is private property damage caused by the size of the tree and the roots. And what we typically do is go through several images to show you the site and the subject tree. So this is the location. As you can see, this tree and its root system has caused quite a bit of damage to the immediate infrastructure, and it's damaging the concrete and the small retaining wall that is above the sloping driveway. Also, the stairs are angled like this to meet certain stairway measurements and is causing quite a bit of damage. Another image from the side showing how folks step up and down in and out of the stairway to access the home. And again, quite a bit of damage. And this is an example of planting a really large stature tree really close to property. The other issue is that it has multiple stems with included bark, codominant stems. And this narrow angle of attachment really makes that section of the tree, the structure of the tree, prone to failure. And as you can see, the tree is quite close to the front of the building. We've talked a lot about structural concerns in this species of ficus along 24th Street. The top and bottom red arrows show our concerns about angles of attachment that are narrow in nature and prone to fail. This is what a mature ficus tree looks like. This was at Joe DiMaggio Playground at Lombard, and this tree failed. And I just wanted to show what the mature size of this species looks like, because when you look back at the subject tree, you can just see that it's planted in a very, very small space up against the building and is causing infrastructure damage. So, based on those site conditions and what we know about this species, the decision at the staff level was to approve the tree for removal. The sidewalk itself is too narrow to require a required replacement tree directly adjacent to the property. And also to note, in the image on the left, there's a gas line, and this is not a site that we would require the property owner to replant. I believe they would like to replant, and they can choose to replant on their own, sort of at their own risk, and it would be up to the property owner to determine the exact location of that gas line when they're considering replacement. But unfortunately, there's just not enough room for us to require a replacement tree at this location. So again, our staff approved the removal, and it was protested during the 30-day public notification. And that concludes the staff portion of the presentation.
Okay, very good, thank you. Are there any public speakers on this item? I see one hand up on the list. It's Lance Carnes. So I'm not sure if you want to speak or not, but I'll allow you to speak. Lance Carnes, I've unmuted you. If you have something to say, your hand is up.
And I think I unmuted myself. So can you hear me?
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, okay. And I sent some slides in to your staff to display as I speak.
Okay, do we have those slides?
I will pull those up. So I'm sorry, we may not have those prepared. So I would say I will try to pull those up. Lance, I'm sorry about that. Let me, I've got to log in remotely and grab those.
Okay. Lance, Mr. Carnes, if it would be permissible, can I start with, there's another caller with a hand up. I'll go there while Chris tries to get the slides up. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. Amy, you have your hand up. I'm sorry, I don't have your last name. It just says Amy. Amy, are you able to talk?
You might have to promote her to panelist. She's using an older Zoom link.
Yeah, I just did. So, Amy, you should be able to talk if you're trying to speak. Oh, your audio isn't working. I just saw the chat. Okay. Well, I see a couple other attendees that want to speak. So while you work on that, let me go to Josh Clipp. Mr. Clipp, you can speak now.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great, thanks. Chris, thanks for the presentation, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. Just one comment that I just did a Google map look at this area overall, and I believe this is the last tree on the block. And I think there's also, and I understand what Chris is saying about the public right-of-way not having the sufficient width to sustain a replanting, I guess. I would just, encourage whoever the owner is, whoever the applicant is, if they are able to do some type of replanting on their private property, to please do that, and maybe even talk to your neighbors, because there is just it's basically an entire alley full of impermeable surface, and certainly that is exactly the opposite of what our world needs right now. So I would just, if the applicant is on this call, or this can be communicated to them in some way, I would just greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Clip. I appreciate that. Amy, if you want to start typing in your questions, your issue into the chat, if you haven't figured out the audio, we'll work on that. In the meantime, while you're typing, I'll go back to Mr. Carnes to see if we can get him to and get his slides up. Chris, do you have the slides up that Mr. Carnes submitted?
Sorry about that. I'm still trying to get those accessed.
Okay. All right. Mr. Carnes, we won't leave without giving you an opportunity. Amy, again, I apologize. I don't have your last name, so I apologize for using your first name. Did you want to type? Oh, did you want to type something in?
I believe she's off the call now.
Okay. So, Lance, I think these might be your.
They are. We've located it.
Okay. So, I think you can.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So if you could scoot back up, please, to the first slide, maybe centered on the screen. That's good. So you've already seen this tree. This is a photo of the tree. Oh, by the way, before I start, how much time do we have to speak?
Well, supposedly 3 minutes. If you need to go a little longer, I just ask you to be respectful of everyone's time.
Okay. So this is a photo that showed up on what's called the DPW removals website, and it showed up on January 13th, 2020. It was probably about, gosh, what, 9 months ago?
Uh-huh.
9 months ago. And when I saw this, I'm very fond of ficus trees, especially robust and well-formed ones like this. So I immediately protested its removal. If you can move to the next slide. So this is the message I got back from DPW. They always try to talk me out of my protest. And if you could scoot down a little bit more and show the whole message. Sometimes when I talk to DPW, I wonder if we're speaking the same language. And if you look at this message, it's pretty clear we're probably not. Going on to the next slide, please. So back up just a teens. Yeah. So this is a view from looking from the south end of Abbey Lane up north, and so as you can see, the subject trees in the foreground, and towards the end of the lane, you'll see some other foliage, but that actually is a tree that's in the historic Mission Dolores Cemetery. So there's really only one major tree on Abbey Street. And then right next door, you can see there's a small tree. So the next slide, please. So my question is to the applicant, the owner, why remove this tree? There's a couple considerations. One is it seems that the tree is on private property, even though it's a public lane, it's actually not on the city grid for tree maintenance. So they'd have to take care of the pruning expense themselves. The damage to the driveway retaining wall has been there for many years. Repairing the retaining wall and sidewalk would be have to be done regardless whether the tree was removed or not. I have a property where it had a similar problem. A large tree in front of the property buckled a few of the sidewalk squares and started growing up into my sewer. So we managed to take care of all this stuff, keep the roots in place and fix the sidewalk squares, and the tree was retained. And the damage I saw on my property was much worse than what I see here. So also, if we could go back to the previous slide. So, yeah. So as my friend Josh Clipp mentioned, if you look down this street, imagine what it looked like without that tree. It's just a street with concrete sidewalks. And in this city, you have such a beautiful tree growing on this little lane that it'd be a shame to take it down. It'll just make it into a scene right out of Baghdad or something, just a bombed out little alley. Whereas right now it has a lot of charm to it. And so I guess as a result, I'd like to urge DPW to deny the tree removal and to preserve this large, beautiful, ecologically valuable resource. And that ends my comments.
Very good. Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate you taking the time to call in. Okay, are there any other speakers on this matter? I see one hand up.
I believe Amy. I believe Amy's
Colombano?
back on.
Kristen Colombano.
That's right. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
So I am the owner of this Jurassic tree, and it's causing a lot of property damage beyond just the retaining wall and garage as it goes into the sewage and the foundation of our house. It's very, very close to the actual building. And though it is a beautiful, healthy tree, I think it is the wrong tree for where it's located. And we are also fearful that it will have failure and possibly damage our home or across the street to the cars and other. Who knows when it falls, what would happen? And I don't like to think about that. We have every intention of replacing the tree with something that's a better fit. And we are working with the arborist, the San Francisco arborist, to take their suggestions of what will work. So there will be green on Abbey Street. There aren't many trees there are very small trees. There's a couple. There's a palm tree and a few other, but it's very small, and I get it. We want a green San Francisco as well. We are a third generation San Franciscan family, and we care a great deal about the beauty of our city. So I disagree that it's gonna look like Baghdad or that it's bombed in any way. I hope that you guys will allow us to take the tree down and replace it with something that's a better fit. And that's safer for our neighborhood. So,
Great, thank you very much.
thank you for the opportunity to speak.
No, thank you for calling in. Okay, are there any other speakers? I don't see any hands raised. I don't see any other speakers. Does the department have anything else they would wish to follow up with?
No, again, Chris Buck with Public Works. I just want to apologize for not having Mr. Karn's presentation up. We are working out the kinks, but thanks for your patience. I'm glad we were able to pull up those images and do that. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. I'm going to take one item out of order. I'm going to call the fourth item on the agenda, order number 203530, 1550 Evans Avenue, the new Southeast Community Center. So Chris, are you going to make that presentation?
Yes, good evening. Chris Buck with Public Works, Bureau of Urban Forestry. And our next application is regarding tree removal adjacent to 1550 Evans Avenue. This is at the corner of 3rd and Evans Street and Newhall, which is right in the edge of India Basin Industrial Park. It's the site also of the new Southeast Community Facility. And we'll have some colleagues talk a little bit more about the project itself. But I'm going to focus on the street trees, the sidewalk trees that are adjacent to the property on the 3 frontages. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen with the PowerPoint. And let me bring that up from current slide. So this is regarding the removal of 28 street trees along the 3 frontages, and with replacement with 36 trees. So our staff approved the removal and the public has protested. And again, it's the site of the new Southeast Community Facility that's currently underway. So what I'm going to do is kind of do a little bit of a tour of the 3 frontages and talk about the overall tree conditions. And in this particular case, when projects come before us, it could be a streetscape project, it could be development. In this case, this is a PUC and city-led project. It's also involved with the upgrade of the Southeast treatment plant in Bayview. The street trees themselves are not in conflict with much that's related to the project itself, with one small exception along 3rd Street. But we're going to start our tour on Newhall. And so along Newhall, what we have are a row of carob trees. And basically what we try to do at Public Works is look at the conditions of trees adjacent to city projects to understand, you know, when this project is completed, what are the conditions of the trees? Are we, you know, are there chances to improve the condition of the trees? In this particular case, we worked with the project team to understand what their overall goals of the project were in property. We also determined that they had funding to plant replacement trees. So before we went out, and as we're going out and evaluating the condition of trees, we understood that they had funding to plant 36-inch box replacement trees. So our inspector, Marcus Dotson, and myself went out to evaluate the trees, prepared to, you know, stand up for the street trees that are in good condition and require that they remain on site. When we evaluated the trees along Newhall, the trees are actually in poor condition. They have very poor vigor. Carob should be vigorous and healthy looking at all times. And you can see in this image on the far right, there's these dead branch tips, and that's not a good sign. One thing to note is originally we stated there would be 9 trees removed along Newhall, but this 9th tree furthest to the north and the east is beyond the project scope. So this tree is no longer part of the conversation. So it's 8 trees along Newhall. But these are some of the characteristic conditions of the existing trees. Again, you can see the dieback on the tops of the trees. Some of them have had a lot of branch failures. And again, just really poor condition for these trees. It's a industrial / commercial office park. It's a relatively narrow sidewalk, so we have had to make repeated sidewalk repairs out there, and that's, in my opinion, what's likely caused the decline in the canopies. Some of these have trunk injuries from injuries that occurred ages ago. The tree on the left is quite small, as you can see, because branches have broken off the top of it. And this tree on the far right, actually the main trunk is snapped, and the side branch, the lateral branch, bless it, has started becoming like the new stem of the tree. So again, this is a tree that's snapped off and has had a side branch try to assume the role of the new stem. So those are the conditions that we found along Newhall, trees that we typically would recommend be removed and replaced. The trees along Evans Ave are ginkgo trees, and ginkgos are a really tough, amazing, appropriate tree in most urban settings. But what we've found is that on Evans, the wind has just been too much, even for a ginkgo, which is typically relatively tolerant of pretty strong winds. But in this case, the winds here in the Bayview they're in really, pretty much a daily force on these trees. And so we have not been able to establish good structure on these trees. They've grown very, very slowly. I've lived in the neighborhood for almost 20 years now, and it just feels like these trees they grow enough just to stay alive. So once we evaluated the conditions of these trees along with the apple tree, we found that all conditions of the trees on Evans are very poor. Regarding 3rd Street has a mix of species. There are some smaller Brisbane box trees, which can remain. Those are closer to the corner towards Evans. The acacia trees on 3rd Street are mature, and the challenge with managing blackwood acacia trees, or Acacia melanoxylon, is their real intolerance to root disturbance. And by root disturbance, we mean routine sidewalk repairs. And so we have 7 blackwood acacias that have low vigor, poor structure, and repeated sidewalk damage. Again, sidewalk damage in and of itself is never a reason to initiate the removal of a tree. That said, when we weigh it with other factors, such as the susceptibility of the species to handle root pruning, or poor vigor and poor structure, then that becomes a very significant factor. It's a species that we have a lot of in the city, but we've stopped planting since probably about the mid-1990s. We had a lot of them on Haight Street and Divisadero, but we've experienced again and again any root pruning, and we experience root failures. An incomplete total root failure where the tree falls down rather dramatically. Hoodline online has documented a lot of those failures quite a bit. And so what we've learned over the years through experience and expertise, knowing species, is that making these sidewalk repairs is really not going to allow us to retain these trees. We're going to need to cut roots that will destabilize the trees. Additionally, the project team has also been in touch with our accessibility disability coordination team, and the project team is going to expand the width of the sidewalk. The good news about that is that we can plant trees back because of the expansion of the width of the sidewalk. But any ideas of maybe like turning a blind eye to 3rd Street and saying, well, hey, if we don't need to make these repairs, then we can just keep these mature trees. There's existing damage that are tripping hazards that we need to address, and we've already made multiple repairs. And so just reviewing these trees, pointing out the extensive sidewalk damage after multiple repairs already, reduced vigor, and also cracked branches and some branch failures, as well as decline or dieback within the canopies. So again, when we evaluated the trees along 3rd Street, we realized the Brisbane box trees were young and doing fine. Unfortunately, we could not find any acacia trees with which to say, we can work with this tree, we can retain it as part of the site and the repairs. And getting ready to summarize the case, one other thing to point out regarding replacement trees, we talked extensively with members of the community and the project team to review the proposed replacement trees. We really wanted to make sure that when we present to you this evening and we say that 36 trees can be replanted, that it's fully vetted and we've taken into every consideration a utility that we can think of. So our team has reviewed these very closely, and we can confirm that there's room for 36 replacement trees of a 36-inch box size to be planted and watered by the project team. And one other note is that there was also a request from the community to salvage what wood would be salvageable on the acacias. It's considered to be a very highly regarded urban wood reuse species. And so we've agreed to keep that from going into the greenway system, but retaining those for reuse. And so we've also committed to that as well. But with that, that really wraps up the staff presentation. We'll also hear some feedback from project team members who are overseeing the project itself, because we want to really explain the partnership in the replacement trees and the commitment to that. But that summarizes more or less the history of this site, why we've initiated the trees for removal, and why we believe that replacing them at this point in time is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Very good. Are there any speakers? There was one hand up, but that just disappeared. Or is there anyone else that would like to, any other project team? Oh, Brett's a speaker. Okay. Where's Brett? All right, there you are.
Hey,
Okay, Brett, can you please give me your full name?
Sure. My first name is Brett, B-R-E-T-T. My last name is D-E-S-M-A-R-A-I-S.
Okay, and you work for?
The Bureau of Landscape Architecture
Got
in
it.
Public Works.
Very good. Proceed.
Okay. So I'm just going to provide just a brief summary of the project. And so I'm sharing my screen. Just please confirm if you can see it.
I can, yes. Go ahead.
Okay. So as I said, my name is Brett Demray. I'm representing Public Works Bureau of Landscape Architecture, which provided the design services for this project. And so the Southeast Community Center is a complete renovation of nearly 5-acre site in the Bayview neighborhood. It's bound by 3rd Street to the west, Evans Street to the south, and Newhall to the east. Facility improvements in this first phase of the project, which you're seeing, would include 2 buildings that will house office space that would include room for a nonprofit organization, a daycare facility with an adjoining outdoor play space, and a community room for events. The landscape has similarly been designed with the community in mind. It includes a large outdoor amphitheater for events, a nature play area, and outdoor barbecue and picnic areas. The site features extensive low-impact stormwater design, which collects runoff from buildings and paving, cleans and filters it in the landscape, and allows it to infiltrate and recharge groundwater. Approximately 150 new trees are included in the project, which have been selected for their adaptiveness to climate change, their value to pollinators and wildlife, seasonal interest, and their ability to sequester carbon. The planting design uses native shrubs and perennials to support wildlife, and also allows people to more closely experience and enjoy nature in an urban environment. Thank you.
Great, very good. Thank you. Is there anything else, sir?
Nope, that's all.
Okay. The executive director of the center has been on twice. I've seen her names on the participant list, but she keeps dropping off. Oh, there you are. Okay. Go ahead. Ms. Rogers-Farr, please go ahead. You're unmuted, so. Ms. Rogers-Farr, if you're talking, we can't hear you. If you would like to, I saw you had typed something. Yes, I'm sorry, we can't hear you. So if you want to type in your comments, I'll read them out loud, but we are not hearing you, and you're unmuted. So what I'll do is this. I will go on to see if there's any public speakers on this. And in the meantime, okay, okay, go continue on. I see this. So Miss Rogers Farr is the executive director of the Southeast Community Center. And she's saying this is a really important project for the community. The trees that we are replacing support the project. We've gone through an extensive community process. It's important that these sort of issues not slow our progress. So Ms. Rogers Farr, let me know when you're done typing and you've completed. I'll reread your entire statement just so there's some continuity to your thoughts. The replanting of 180 trees across the project will bring beautiful and much needed increase in the overall canopies. And supports the community and commission's vision. Okay, so she's completed her thing. Let me reread it so there's some continuity to what she had to say. And I apologize that you weren't able to get on this way, but we're all working through this. So this is from Miss Emily Rogers Farr, who's the executive director of the Southeast Community Center. This is a really important project for the community. The trees that we are replacing support the project. We've gone through an extensive community process. It's important that these sorts of issues not slow our progress. The replanting of 180 trees across the project will bring beautiful and much needed increase in the overall canopies and supports the community and commission's vision. So that's a statement from Ms. Emily Rogers Farr, who's the executive director of the Southeast Community Center. Okay. So thank you, and again, I apologize that we weren't able to hear you. So with that, let me go. Are there any other? Oh, and we're widening. She's also adding that we're widening the sidewalks for improved pedestrian experience. Thank you. Okay, so with that, are there any other project sponsors, department speakers? If anyone is there to do that, please let me know. Otherwise, we'll go to public comment. Is there any public comment on this? I see one speaker, Mr. Josh Clipp. You should be able to speak now, Mr. Clipp. Go ahead.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
I sure can.
Great. Thank you. First thing I want to do is acknowledge the reuse of the acacia. I want to thank the project and the department for doing that. This is part of the full cycle wood use that is anticipated by the San Francisco Urban Forest Plan, and it does prevent that sequestered carbon from re-entering the environment. So it's good to see that happening. Some questions for the department. The photos of some of those trees that you showed are pretty beat up. Some of them look like they've been beat up because they were placed in maybe high wind corridors, and some of them look like they had suffered from vandals being vandalized. So what I didn't hear was how these new trees are going to survive those same conditions that impacted the first ones. What's the difference here? How is that going to be different this time around? I would also like to know about a commitment to replanting new trees that don't make it for any reason. And I'll give the example of the SFMTA's rapid transit lane that's going in 2 phases down 16th Street, where they planted a number of trees, and almost immediately within a couple of blocks, 4 of those were broken down and literally broken in half and pulled out of the ground. And I understand that the SFMTA, I believe, has now made that right and has replanted them. And so what I'm wondering from the project is what money is set aside for replacements, because I'm sure that there will be trees that need to be replaced. And I would point to the example of Public Works commitment on the 24th Street project, that they have committed to replacing vandalized trees within 2 months. So I'm wondering if there is a similar commitment and funding for that with this project. For the replacement trees, I'm very curious to know what considerations in determining species were given to environmental factors. I know at some point there was a discussion of palms, which I think Chris could tell you do not have a whole lot of environmental value in as trees go, and were essentially seem to have been proposed for aesthetic reasons. And I'd also point your attention to an article in 48 Hills today regarding air quality in the Bayview, specifically noting that air quality is bad all over the city, but nowhere is it worse than in the Bayview. And one of the quotes from that article is, quote, "I demand you get air filters for all residents in Bayview." Well, that's what trees do 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I would really be curious to know what kind of environmental considerations were made in terms of determining tree replacements. So those are my questions. How are we going to prevent what happened to the first set of trees? What is the plan for replacing trees? What is the plan for protecting them? How soon would they be replaced? And what kinds of environmental factors were considered in terms of the replacements? Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Klipp. Okay. Mr. Nolte, it looks like you have your hand raised. Let me go ahead.
My name is Michael Nolte, and it always amazes me how trees can be removed, and then the problem is the public isn't aware of how well the trees will be maintained and how many will. Well, in this case, we're being told how many will be replaced, but again, it's the value of the replacement. Is the replacement equal to what's being taken away? And if the trees are not sturdy enough, as if like the previous speakers mentioned, they will need to be replaced possibly several times. It's a 3-year cycle for new. 3 years it will take for a new tree to finally hold it into where it's been placed. So I'd like to know the commitments of the trees. I might have not heard the whole presentation because I had a hard time getting online. This is the problem with the new way of getting online. And so I apologize for that part. But, as a member of the public, this has been an ongoing problem of being able to participate in public hearings and also getting the documents or getting information before the hearings, or you end up having to respond quickly to a presentation after it's been mentioned at a public hearing. So it comes also to the issue of transparency. I've been to other meetings where there would be a binder when we didn't have COVID of the information for the public to review before the meeting ever got started, so they would have some knowledge about the topics that are going to be discussed. A lot of times the departments and whoever else speaks to these issues, they only allow that information to be transpired at the time of the meeting, and therefore the public has really very little voice to what's to say, because unless they're very knowledgeable about the project, they can't really respond adequately. So my concerns have always been transparency, and I'm also in dealing with low-income residents and residents in certain neighborhoods that are, in this case, the one that's being this project is. The air quality needs to be maintained at a level that's above what it is, not same as, and trees that actually will improve the quality over the years, the life of the tree or trees. And so it's important that the quality of the trees, I don't know how big the trees will be once planted. And I don't know what the budget is of the trees, but you know, it's important that these kinds of things are met by the project sponsor. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Nolte. John 3 has his hand up. So, sir, if you would please state your name and spell it just so I can get it correct.
Yes, my name is John Nulty, N-U-L-T-Y.
Okay.
I've been a tree advocate for over 20 years, and I would like to know the questions to, since this is a public project where public funds are being used, when did DPW get involved? I hear about the SF, the PUC being involved, but I didn't hear about DPW when they should have been involved at the beginning when this proposed site was being bought by bought for this reuse for the health center and so forth that are going on, and also for the over $30 million of bond money for the community college that's planned for the site. So we have multiple streams of money coming in for this project, which is all taxpayers' money and bond money. The bond money was passed in March of this year for the city college and for this community college site. So I'm questioning, just because now they broke ground a couple months ago, the permit is now needed for the removal of all these trees, and it should have been done. The DPW should have been at the here working with these different departments that are involved and the community way before it got to the point where they're asking for a permit so they could proceed with the tree removals. The tree removals I question because they are mature trees, and I hear that the 36-inch blocks are going in, but that doesn't mean that the 36-inch blocks will last as longer, or they will grow slower and will not mature faster than a smaller tree. So I'm concerned about the site what was picked, and also how that will affect the community, and it will take probably X amount of years before they even get to the size or what's there now. Also, we're going through a drought, and you can see what the drought has done to the existing trees, and what's going to prevent that happening to the new trees because of the inability to water the trees in an appropriate manner and maintain them so they stay and not and work out for the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you calling in. Okay, are there any other public speakers on this matter? All right, Chris, did you want to respond to any of those questions? And then also, just, you know, we don't want to encourage this, but since this is our first Zoom meeting and we're still getting used to it, there is one question from Amy, and I apologize, I don't have the last name. would like an explanation of benefiting the right of way. So if we could address that, and again, I don't want to encourage people to ask questions on the chat because it makes it difficult to track it. But in light of this is our first one, we'll go there. So Chris, I'll turn over to you to respond to any questions or to any comments that you may have or follow up.
Sure. Thank you. Chris Buck with Public Works, Bureau of Urban Forestry. And yeah, we don't always, kind of do a rebuttal the way that, it's not rebuttal, but we're not set up the way the Board of Appeals is. But when there's a project of this size and there's questions, it really does make sense to just take the time and try to answer those at the hearing and not necessarily just wait for a resulting decision to come out to answer those decisions. So some really great questions. So let me dive in real quick. Mr. Klipp had a couple of good points. On the environmental considerations, I do want to point out, one of the things our staff is proud about with this project is that when the project team approached us, there was a real preference among some involved with the project to have palm trees planted along 3rd Street. And some members of the public and our bureau was not supportive of palm trees along 3rd Street because they really don't provide the number of environmental benefits that mature trees do. So we did actually work quite closely with the project team to get the species to change. We agreed and settled on Brisbane box or Lophostomen confertus. And the reason for that is it was one of the species selected when the light rail improvements went in. And so we went through a similar process, 18 years ago about tree removal along 3rd Street, and we have a palette that's established. And so Brisbane box trees are the species that we want to plant and maintain along 3rd Street. So environmental factors and considerations were definitely considered. All frontages will have large stature trees, of course, at maturity. The species along Evans are Platanus acerifolia, now called Platanus hispanica. Columbia is the cultivar. And then along Newhall, we have another species, which is one that we've been trying to be a little bit more, not experimental, but we want to see more of in the city, which is a California native, a Quercus tomentella or island oak. And that would be along Newhall. So we have 3 different species. So we've got some species diversity. They're all large stature trees at maturity. Regarding replacement trees, tree protection measures robust measures will be installed when the trees are planted. And we don't anticipate a lot of vandalism, but if there's any trees vandalized, we will need to replant those, or the project team will need to replant those. I will say that on 16th Street, those 4 trees that were vandalized, we just got tree protection installed around them, and they were damaged after the protection was installed. That was particularly irksome, and we directed the owner to replant, and they engaged Friends of the Urban Forest to replant right away and reinstall tree protection. So tree protection is important. There is funding for replacement trees. I can't commit to a turnaround time on that, but let's just say 3 months. I think 2 months was super aggressive with 24th, but a 3-month turnaround for this project seems reasonable. And then there was a question about benefiting the public right of way. I'm not quite sure were there any other details on the question from Amy on that?
No, but I think during your initial presentation, you spoke about the overarching goals of the department to
Okay.
protect the urban forest and things that would benefit the public right of way.
Sure, and I'll wrap that up and speak to Mr. Nolte's question as well. So, I think what's important for the city family to think about is doing a ribbon cutting and having a really great facility, and then turning around and being faced with a bunch of trees that are failing and breaking apart along 3rd Street. So I understand Mr. Nolte's point about the timing, but we've actually been involved from day one, and there are no physical conflicts with the existing trees. So we don't have curb cut, we don't have development conflicts. The trees aren't being removed because of the physical nature of the project. They're being removed because we have an opportunity to replace trees that are really in poor condition with better trees. And so it does set the clock back from having these large trees serve as an air filter. But at the same time, having trees that are completely not growing well and not producing those services, at a certain point, we have to say it's time to move on with a different species. So trees are in good condition. We are directing to be retained. There's 2 or 3 Brisbane box on 3rd Street that'll be retained. But that presents, wraps up the staff presentation. Those are great questions. I appreciate it.
Okay, and did you want to speak to the benefiting the public right away at all?
Well, I think there was one comment about the sidewalk widening along 3rd Street. Certainly the idea is to make this, and I'm speaking now kind of outside of my Bureau of Urban Forestry role, but just in general, widening that sidewalk on 3rd Street, again, is not the reason for removal, but it is one of the improvements to that physical site that will make the site much more inviting and accessible to the community. Right now, it's very, very narrow. The 2 traffic lanes are very narrow, and bicyclists right now really illegally go on the sidewalk. Well, that's got to change when this project is completed. And so there needs to be a widened sidewalk. And so some of those benefits, will be a part of that overall.
Okay, all right, very good. Well, with that, we'll close this item and move on to the next one. We'll go back in order. So it's item number 3 on the agenda, order number 203-529, 145 6th Avenue, to consider removal of 1 street tree with replacement. Department?
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Chris Buck again with Bureau of Urban Forestry, San Francisco Public Works. And I'll go ahead and share my screen and pull up the PowerPoint here. Slideshow from current. So, pardon me. So the subject tree in this case is adjacent to 145 6th Avenue. And it's to consider, as you stated, the removal of 1 tree with replacement. At the urban forestry staff level, our inspector evaluated the tree and initiated the tree for removal, and the public protested. And so I kind of go through a visual highlight of the subject tree itself. These are images. The image on the left was taken by Google Street View in November 2015. Obviously, when you see that tree, it looks lush and vigorous and it doing everything a tree we want it to do. The photo on the right is taken from October 30th. What we can't see in this image is what's going on the other side of the tree, which is that over the last several years, this tree has experienced a number of branch failures, as many as 7 branch failures in the last couple of years. So the remaining branches that are attached to the tree have very weak attachments. So they have a narrow angle of attachment with deep included bark. And so even the remaining branches are prone to fail. And I've seen this on this is a sweet gum tree. I've seen it on similar species. Liquid amber styrosifloa is the Latin or scientific name. They're a fast-growing tree. They're planted a lot, particularly in the suburbs, like down in Palo Alto and the peninsula. It does have deciduous leaves with fall color, but it also causes a lot of damage to the sidewalk. But it is also prone to experiencing these limb failures. And so we don't know exactly what happened with this species, but it does look like this tree was not grown well at the nursery, and as a result, as it started to get established, it's experienced a lot of large branch failures. And from some of these angles, it doesn't look like such a big tree, but again, I wanted to provide plenty of images just to show overall that it's actually getting to be a good sized tree, but it's experienced all these branch failures. Additionally, I'm just pointing out the site itself is replantable. You can see other street trees up and down the block. In the foreground, if you note on the sidewalk, there's the lighter colored sidewalk with some hash marks on that. So what this means is that the sidewalk has been repaired somewhat recently, and it's being damaged again by the root system. That is not the reason that we've initiated the removal, but I'm just making a note of that as well. Also noting that there are no utility conflicts that we see. So a replacement tree is definitely will be required at this site. And again, just wanted to reiterate, it's not typical to have a youngish tree like this really losing a lot of branches. The remaining sections of the tree aren't really poor structurally. If you look at the image on the left, there's a single stem and then it divides into 3 or 4 images. And I could see on Google there used to be a squirrel's nest in the top of that. But at some point the tree was topped, either accidentally by birds or the wind, possibly by humans, but it doesn't look like there was a topping cut. So it could be that it had a branch failure and then it sprouted more stems above. So without a doubt, this tree is really telling us it's not appropriate to be here in a public sidewalk anymore. Our urban forestry staff evaluated it. Again, looked at all the different locations on the tree where it's experienced failures. And for us, this is a very obvious need to remove the tree, regardless of that foliage is green. So it's very obvious removal for us. It really needs to be removed. Nothing on this tree is salvageable that I would feel comfortable leaving in the public right of way. So once we confirmed that the site is replantable, our staff initiated the removal, and during the public notification period, a protest was received, so we scheduled it for this hearing. But to confirm, it is replantable and will be replaced by Public Works, and/or I also believe the property owner is very interested in adding landscaping to their site and planting the replacement tree. So it's most likely that the site itself will be replanted through the assistance of Friends of the Urban Forest, which is one of our community planting partners. But that's why we initiated the removal. The tree is really not in good condition, and there's nothing we can do to make that not be the case. So for us, this is a straightforward case of needing to remove and replace the tree. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. So are there any public comments on this? Anyone want to speak? I don't see any, I see one hand raised now. All right, Mr. Nolte, let me, okay, you should be able to speak now, Mr. Nolte.
Hi, my name is Michael Nolte. Okay, there we go. Hi, my name is Michael Nolte, and I used to live on 6th Street, and I know that it's very important in this part of the city that the trees, particularly the street trees, be maintained. If there's a big problem with the street trees, in this case, the street tree, having its ability to take hold or stay functional, I agree with the homeowner to have it removed. But I also want to point out another issue that I was just made aware of. All the phone numbers for the Zoom web bar are long distance numbers, and members of the public don't always have access to being able to call long distance to be able to call in, to use the call-in numbers. So if possible, I don't know who's in charge of creating the phone numbers or getting the phone numbers. It would be nice if you could get a 415 or the other number, area code that's for San Francisco, so they're not being charged either a Zoom, a long distance call of some kind to get access to participate in this on these hearings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nolte. I'm looking, I thought the Zoom number was a toll-free number, but I don't have that Oh, here it is. Should be on the agenda. I don't see that. We will check on that for you, sir. And I appreciate that comment and letting us know. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Seeing no other speakers on this matter, we will conclude this. We've already heard item number 4, which was this 1550 Evans Street. So we'll move on to number 5 on the agenda. Order number 203-531, 3937 21st Street, to consider removal of one significant tree on private property with replacement. Staff approved the removal and the public has protested. So with that.
Great. Good evening. Chris Buck with Public Works, Bureau of Urban Forestry. And before I jump into this one, I realized on the 1550 Evans case, on the species for Evans Avenue, it's Platanus racemosa, not Platanus acerifolia. So Platanus racemosa, that's a California native, and it's actually really tolerant of sort of poor soil quality, meaning heavily saturated with water. And so that was another environmental consideration.
Great,
Thank you. So I'm going to start here for, move on to the next case. So the next item is, we're going to be talking about a significant tree, which is a tree that is on private property, but within 10 feet of the public right of way. And I just want to confirm that you can see my PowerPoint.
Not yet.
Great. Okay, great. So thank you.
So Chris, your PowerPoint's not up yet.
Okay. All right. Let me, sorry. I need to go to share screen. Pardon me.
There you go.
Perfect.
Thank you all. I appreciate it. Thank you. So this particular tree is a tree that's located on private property, although as you can see, it wants to be in the right of way. This is a plum tree, a prunus species, and we received an application for removal from the property owner at 3937 21st Street. And it's permit application 785171. So on the application, the reasons for removal was that the location of the tree and that the roots are damaging the neighbor's stairwell foundation. And some of our general findings with this tree in the site is that given evidence of decay, which we'll show, we do not think the tree can safely remain on site, and given the needed root pruning to fix the stairwell foundation. The plum tree is located really close to that property line. Both owners have enjoyed the tree for many years. The owners have been pruning it annually to maintain a smaller, manageable size. Now, managing it in a smaller size, actually, even though we want to see trees remain in a larger capacity, a tree like this with multiple stems and decay and cracks present, reducing that weight of the branches definitely has allowed this tree to remain on the site longer. And so I'm just going to go through and really cover a lot of branches. And I just want to say, this is a pretty old tree. Plum trees are not very long-lived trees. We used to plant so many of the purple leaf plum trees all over San Francisco. One highlighted area is Edgewood, up off of Woodland, off of Parnassus. Some amazing purple leaf plum trees. But after about 20 or 30 years, they do start developing decay. So it's a species that doesn't have a high tolerance to resisting wood decay. That's one of the characteristics. So with all that said, looking at this site, as you'll see in the photos, we wish, more property owners would be willing to take, on such a site and a tree and do that, but it's really challenging. And so in this particular site, we have cracks where the stems join. We have fruiting bodies, which are decay conchs or bracket fungus, which is a sign of decay. And this dark wood within the center of this photo is wood that's been degraded by decay. The concern about decay is that wood is a very strong material, as we know. We all build with it. But wood that is decayed has zero holding capacity. And so the big question is, how much decay can a tree sustain while remaining upright? And generally, we need about at least a third of the wood surrounding the tree to be intact, that's sound. Less than that, and you're really getting into a public safety concern with potential failure if the tree is located in an urban environment. So in this case, the tree is located in an urban environment. We have cracks and decay formation, decay present in many areas of the tree. And the tree, either volunteered itself or was planted there by an owner, previous or current, but it's really outgrown its space. It's in poor condition. And so this was a pretty straightforward approval from our perspective. Our inspector did still take the time to do a thorough evaluation of the tree and the site. These images show that the tree base and the roots are damaging the neighbor's stairwell foundation. It's also pushing the base of the concrete retaining wall out over the plane, as you can see here. The blue arrow is showing that lower concrete pushing out towards the sidewalk. These are some more images showing that. So again, we talk about trees being relatively healthy and sustainable. We love seeing it when homeowners have held on as long as they can to a tree that they clearly have put a lot of time and energy into preserving. That said, we also feel like, without a doubt, this is a reasonable tree to remove. I do believe the inspector has stated that they intend to plant a replacement tree at the site. And just going back, there are trees and plants in the sidewalk. Again, well-maintained property, but it's just no longer a healthy tree and really does need to be removed. So our staff approved the tree for removal, and during the public notification, the proposed removal was protested. And that concludes the staff presentation.
All right, very good. Just for the record, Mr. Clip was kind enough to put a link in the chat room regarding Zoom calls. And I know someone from Public Works is checking on the issue of the toll-free call. But thank you very much, Mr. Nolte, for bringing that up. I have one speaker, and I'll get to that speaker in a second. I also want to, just for the record, note that I have a letter with some attached documentation from the applicant for the tree removal, and I have reviewed that. So with that, I see one hand up, and Ms. Pamela Rockwell.
Yes,
I think you're allowed to speak. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for this chance to speak. As you can see, my name's Pam Rockwell, and I am the next door neighbor to the applicant at 3937 for the tree removal, and I am sadly here to support the application. I believe you mentioned that you got my written statement, so I'll try to keep my comments here really brief. But first, I just want to acknowledge the feelings of those who want to keep this tree, because I love this tree too. It is one of the reasons that I bought my house here 30 years ago, and I've loved it for all those 30 years, even though it's gotten into my main sewer line twice now. And I've had to replace the entire line twice at a total cost of over $30,000. But it was worth it to me to keep that tree. But as you've seen in the pictures that have been presented, that it's grown now into my front staircase and into the foundation. And I've even talked to 2 contractors and a certified arborist to see if there's any way to make the repairs and keep the tree. But I've been told again and again that the damage can't be repaired unless the tree is removed, and it's only going to get worse as the tree grows. The current estimate to make these repairs is $20,000, so that would bring my total damages over the years to about $50,000. So just to reiterate, I love the trees on our block. I love this tree. I maintained 6 trees on the city stair in front of my house. I put in irrigation and paid for yearly pruning by an arborist and biweekly gardening. And I think as much as anyone, I hate to lose this tree or any tree, but after 30 years, I just don't see any other option if I'm going to be able to preserve my home and my property. So it's with much regret, but also with a sense of necessity and some urgency that I'm here to request that you do approve the permit. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you for the letter and thank you for calling in. So I see one more hand up. I'm not going to attempt the name. I'll ask you to state your name and go from there.
Hi, I'm Chevy Lowinger. It just my first name and last name together.
Okay. S-H-E-V-I?
S-H-E-V-I, yes. I'm
Okay.
the owner of the property of 3937 21st Street. As my neighbor Pam, I also love the tree, and I live in this house for almost 10 years now. But I totally understand, as Pam understands, that this is like, it's not longer, good to maintain that. And I promised to put a new tree because we have also many trees in our, before the house, in the front of the house. And I would love to work together with the city to decide what tree to put there, also not to affect Pam's house. So yeah, I really want that will be good for everybody to take this out. So I support my application.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Lowinger. I appreciate the call. Okay, are there any more speakers? Anyone else wish to speak on this matter? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So if there's no other speakers on this matter, we'll close this item and move on to the next one. It's item number 6 on the agenda, order number 203532, 2727 Pier Street. So with that, the department spokesperson.
Thank you. Chris Buck with Public Works, Bureau of Urban Forestry, and I will hit share screen right away. I'm learning to do that a little bit more quickly and get on to the PowerPoint. So let's see, hold on a moment. So again, it's Chris with Public Works, and the subject trees in this agenda are 2 significant trees on private property at 2727 Pier Street. These are both 2 Phoenix canariensis palm trees. And so in this case, we have a mixed denial/approval. We approved the removal of one of the 2 palms, and the public protested the approval. And then the applicant has appealed the denial of the second palm. And so we'll present information and explain what that all means. Here's I believe this image was provided by the applicant, showing the subject site, as we'll see in a moment. Pretty interesting, but the house originally still is set back from the sidewalk, and apparently is a landmark here, which is exciting. So here are images of the subject trees. The trees on the right, again, show that home we were just looking at way back when, and now here we are with the site as it is more recently. Again, the 2 subject trees that have been applied to be removed by the applicant are Phoenix canariensis, or Canary Island date palms. These are the same as we have along the Embarcadero and Dolores. They can grow to be quite old and quite tall, as you can see. And you can also see them down the street as you look up the street, uphill to the south. You can see them in the distance. So certainly very striking. This is a pretty high stakes application to review, to be quite honest, right? These are pretty outstanding palms. And going back to our street tree versus significant tree and what that difference is, trees in the public right-of-way are called street trees, and the city has jurisdiction over those trees. These trees are on private property, but they just meet our spacing within 10 feet of the public right-of-way, as our inspectors noted here. And here's another view of both palms. So the palm that we approved at the staff level is palm number 2, or the one on the left. So when you're facing the property from the road, as we've been doing with these images, we number them 1 and 2. So the tree on the left is actually tree number 2. That's the tree that we've approved, and the tree on the one on the right to the north is tree 1, and that's the one that we denied. And so both trees from a distance appear healthy. Certainly the vigor of both trees is not an issue. The issue here is concern about structural stability. And so our inspector noted in preparation, technically our palms, trees, we don't have to go down that rabbit hole. But the reason why it's important to note and discuss that is that trees that develop wood and suffer injuries don't produce new tissue. They compartmentalize decay, but they add response wood to help structurally maintain themselves. Palms don't do that. So in this case, when palms have decay and develop large cavities, there is not any reaction wood to make up for that loss of strength. So I'm just reading the notes here as our team helped prepare this. They stated that palms are unable to compartmentalize wounds. This often means that even a relatively minor amount of damage can eventually lead to potential failure of a fully grown palm. And the palm on the left is the one that we've approved. And it really had, based on the report submitted with the application for removal, there's extensive decay in the palm tree, tree number 2 on the left. And these are images of that provided by the applicant. There's irregularities and cavities along palm number 2, the south palm. So the arborist reported a hollow area approximately 4 feet in vertical extent. It's approximately 2/3 of the height up the tree, and that's also often where the species will often have a trunk failure when there is decay or cavities present. So for this reason, we did approve palm number 2. It did have, we believe, enough of a cavity, enough decay to make that a public safety concern for us. We believe they've provided enough evidence to make that case. The tree on the right, or the north palm, tree number 1, at the staff level, we denied this request, and it was not done without careful consideration due to potential public safety concerns. So the cavities and the damage on the tree number 1 were just not as extensive or present as they were with the other palm. And so that's really the basis at the staff level of why, when you look at these 2 trees from a distance, we've approved one of them for removal and not both. And so, to be consistent with how we handle similar cases, I know those 2 palms together look pretty striking. We have a lot of cases where a single palm can look just as striking. But I understand from the applicant's perspective, this is not a matter of matching. It's a matter of potential public safety concern, as I think we'll hear from the applicant or their arborist. But to be consistent, we felt like we had enough visual evidence provided by their arborist to approve one of the two palms for removal, but not both palms. And so that's the decision we issued at the staff level. And again, during that posting period, the tree we approved at the staff level was protested. And then if we deny the request to remove a tree, the applicant can also appeal the denial. And so this is a partial denial, and both trees are up for consideration here this evening. Thank you. And I shall note that replacement trees and or tree would be planted by the property owner if approval of one or both palms is granted. Thank you.
Oh, okay, let me ask a couple questions then. Do we know what the replacement trees would be?
You know, I need to double check that. I was in preparation for the hearing. I made a note of that myself. So I do believe the applicant will probably provide that information. I'm sorry, I don't have it right here in front of me.
Because these are pretty significant. The second question I have is, when you say that the palm trees don't necessarily regenerate, so with this type of damage, there's some sense of confidence that the tree would be able to remain, or will it eventually, you know, not necessarily today or tomorrow or next year, but will it eventually fail, or is it going to be able to survive?
Correct. So thank you for kind of clarifying. You know, trees can withstand a certain level of decay present. So some decay is not an issue, but when it becomes extensive, in this case, it's certainly greater than 50%, if not more, of that stem is degraded. And it's degraded for up to 4 feet in length. And so, you know, if you can kind of visualize this column, we're talking about a very significant cavity in the center of that. And some of it's on the side and it comes up a side. And from the arborist report, they can see light up, you know, 4 feet higher from another cavity. So there's a network of decay. Sometimes rodents, mammals will use these areas to make homes for habitat. And another reason why some of these trees can be valuable and you don't want to remove them unnecessarily. But the larger those cavities, the greater the loss of the strength of that palm to be able to hold itself up. So with the palm that we approved, we feel that there's substantial decay and cavities present where there really is a strength loss there that we're concerned about, that I think is a reasonable public safety concern for the property owner to want to address. And what I mean by not putting on reaction wood is an oak tree or other trees would have decay, but they'll keep adding layers of wood and tissue around that and sort of build itself back up. The palm can't do that. And so it's only slowly getting worse. And that's why we approved one palm with a lot of degraded tissue, but not the other one.
Okay. And the one that was not approved, is that going to be stable or is that going to get worse over time? Or are you able to tell?
Well, we believe that at the staff level that there's enough tissue there. There's not the presence of cavities as much as there is. I mean, it just, based on the arborist report, we feel comfortable that they've done a thorough analysis of sounding it for cavities, and you know, we're not hearing that that's an issue with the other palm. Now, over time, it's good to monitor that tree, you know, every year. Again, have the arborist take a look at it, use binoculars. And in this case, what they used to determine the extent of the decay in the palm to the south is an aerial lift. You know, it's called aerial inspection. So they used equipment to get up physically to access that trunk of the tree. So by denying the request of one of the palms, we're really putting it on the owner to essentially once a year, probably get someone up there. Not necessarily, you could use binoculars, and if there's no substantial changes, no need to get someone back up in that aerial lift. but probably an aerial lift every 5 years and once a year with binoculars by a qualified arborist to monitor that.
Okay.
But I can't give you a number of years per
Right.
se.
Did the arborist recommend removal of both trees, removal of one, or?
The arborist report recommended removal of both trees, and I do believe that they'll also speak during this item.
Okay, all right, very good. I see one hand up. So Judge Bea, I'm gonna allow you to speak. Go ahead, please, sir. Judge Bea, oh, there you go, okay.
All right.
We can hear you, sir. Oh, you went back on mute. Now you're off.
All right. I thought that my name is Carlos Bea, capital C-A-R-L-O-S, Bea, B-E-A. And my wife and Louise and I have lived here at 2727 Pier Street since 1986. For the last 34 years, we've raised our family of 4 boys here. Recently, we consulted Roy Liggett, who will speak after me, a certified arborist, because we noticed significant swaying of the 2 palm trees in the wind. Now, this swaying was really brought to our attention by a real estate broker who was selling a house next door, and she was concerned about the 2 trees swaying and causing a danger to the people moving into the place next door. So that brought our attention to it, and then we got Roy, and we hired a lift and a crane, and took it and allowed him to take a very close look up there at considerable cost. He inspected both of those trees using the crane to allow him access to the full height of the trees, and he issued a report saying that both trees pose a significant hazard and should be taken out and replaced by younger, similar canary date palm trees, which we're willing to do. He issued that report. He sent it to the Department of Public Works. You have a copy of it there in your files.
That's 1 minute.
So the department has issued a permit to remove the south tree, but not the north tree. And we were instructed to, quote, wait and watch the north tree. We believe that this is not a reasonable, nor practical, nor logical way to proceed. If there's a risk that the north tree break, it'll break at 2/3 of the way up. And I'm told by Roy Liggett, and he can explain it in better detail, that it's a 20,000-pound weight falling from 60 to 40 feet. And it's going to fall on the sidewalk and the cars and the automobiles going on Pier Street. This is a catastrophic event that we can prevent now if we handle this case reasonably and take, instead of one move to remove one tree and place another tree in its place, and we wait for years to see if the other tree makes it or doesn't make it. It doesn't make sense. If we're going to replace the trees because they have decay in both of them, and the arborist says it's a risk of failure, we ought to do it all at one time. As you notice,
Let Roy talk. You're over a minute and a half.
as you notice, 2727 Pier Street is a San Francisco landmark. It's the house that was built by Mr. Casebolt, who was the inventor of the cable car grip, and he built it in 1866. We're very conscious of our duty as custodians of this landmark. We want to make it as beautiful as possible from people walking behind the street. And we think that cutting down one tree and leaving one long tree up there and a short tree in the other place simply doesn't make sense. So we'll ask you to grant our appeal and let us take both trees out. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May I ask one question? Chris mentioned that you were going to do some replacement trees. Are you able to speak to that, or will Mr. Liggett speak to that? He's on mute. So I'll go to Mr. Liggett. He's got his hand up, and perhaps he can respond to that. Let's see here.
Pardon me.
Go ahead, Mr. Baer.
Yeah, we intend to, please walk out. We intend to replace both palm trees with Canary Island palm trees of smaller height, and Mr. Leggett will speak to that. And now I'll cede to Mr. Leggett.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Hello. Hi, this is Roy Leggett.
Go ahead, sir.
I am the certified arborist who entered both of these trees using an aerial lift, and I used a mallet, an ice pick, and a tile probe. A tile probe is a 4-foot long steel rod with a T-handle. And I checked these trees thoroughly from top to bottom, all the way up to the lower fronds, looking for soft spots, hollows, and also looking for irregularities in the trunk, areas that are thinner or out of alignment, where there's like a bend or a dog leg in the trunk of the trees. So the two trees are a bit different from one another. The south tree, Mr. Buck characterized exactly as I found it. There is an extensive, huge decay area, a very big hollow at about 2/3 the height of that tree, which is kind of the sweet spot where I've experienced these trees failing. I actually manage several hundred of these trees on 4 different cemetery properties in Colma that are part of the Cypress Lawn properties. And we have had a number of failures there. And they tend to fail kind of at that same point. It's kind of a stress point in the trunk. And so that's kind of where the biggest concern lies, is a little ways below what we call the pineapple, which is that area right underneath the fronds that holds the head of the tree together. So the south tree, with that tree needing to be removed because of the extensive decay, the north tree is now going to be fully exposed to wind. That tree is very tall for this species in our climate. It has a clear trunk height of about 55 feet. The pineapple is approximately another 10 feet, and then another additional 20 feet or so of spread to the fronds. So we have a really tall, massive tree that is very high and aloft up over the neighbor's house to the north. This tree has a thinner area in the trunk and a bend in the trunk at about 2/3 the height, which is exactly where we have concerns about trunk failures, and they typically occur. So with the south tree removed, this tree will be fully exposed on the south side to winds. And the tree is experiencing very significant movement during winds right now, even with protection from the south. And the Bayes have actually taken video and shared that with me, and I've seen it myself in person as well. The south palm removed and the north palm left, it'll leave the north palm at an increased risk for failure. The failure in the north palm would result in a piece of the trunk breaking off, as Judge Bayes said, with the entire pineapple and frond head and a piece of the trunk weighing what I estimate to be about 20,000 pounds. The reason I know the weight is because we've transplanted a number of these trees, and these cranes we use to move them have scales on them, so we know how much they weigh. Anyway, this piece would fall about 40 feet to the ground or about 20 feet to the neighbor's house, depending on the direction of the fall. Should the tree fall towards the sidewalk and roadway, it would completely destroy anything on the sidewalk or a parked car beneath it. Should the tree fall to the north, it would strike and severely damage the neighbor's house. It's therefore more likely than not that it's going to strike a target, either the sidewalk and road or the neighbor's house, because that's 3/4 of the circumference of the tree. And those would all be high value targets, and they would cause either severe damage, severe injury, and possibly even kill somebody. The likelihood for failure is higher than for an average or typical tree due to the height of the tree and the exposure of the tree to prevailing winds. And the likelihood for failure will increase substantially due to the removal of the tree at the south side. It'll expose the tree, the north side tree, to winds during storms. Stronger winds from the south will cause the neighbor to the north to be at a significantly increased risk for likelihood for failure and placed at a further elevated risk for severe damage to their home. Since the tree is currently posing a moderate risk for stem failure, the removal of the south tree will, in my opinion, increase the risk posed by the tree to the north to a high level. We have 4 levels of risk: low, moderate, high, and extreme. So it would be at a high level of risk. Based on these factors, I strongly recommend removal of both trees at this time. I think that it's prudent to do that. With removal of both of the trees, the owners are willing to replace the trees with a matched pair of date palms that would be much larger than the minimum required by DPW. They'd have some real presence, visual presence and stature, and be a matched pair. So I think that would be, if we have 10 or 15 feet of trunk height on replacement trees and they're matched, I think that'd be a fantastic outcome. And the trees would have the canopies below the roof lines where they wouldn't pose threats to the neighbor, and they would be sound trees, and just be shorter and stouter, so they wouldn't have the likelihood of failure like the current north tree has. So that's all I have for you.
All right. So if the replacement would be by the size would be a 15 to 20 foot tree, is what you're saying? The representation?
Yeah. Well, the way that palms are measured is clear trunk height.
Okay.
As opposed to total crown height.
Okay.
So the idea of a 10 or we haven't sourced replacement trees because we don't have a permit to remove these yet, but
correct.
These trees are available in the marketplace and they're sold by trunk height, feet of trunk height. So if there's a 10 foot to 15 foot clear trunk height, you would have a total crown height that would be another 10 feet or so above that, with the fronds reaching up. And those would be trees that would be 20 or 25 feet high at the top of the fronds. And those would have a nice large physical presence. They'd frame the house. They would be substantial trees, notable trees, visible from throughout the neighborhood. And they would also be a pair. So if you're looking from the front of the house, you'd have symmetrical or balanced appearance.
Okay. Very good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Are there any other speakers on this item? Chris, can I ask you one question? So when staff did the examination of the tree, did they do it from the ground with binoculars, or how was their examination conducted?
Correct. I mean, we really, it's a visual examination from the ground with the extensive report provided by Mr. Leggett. We certainly review the report closely, read it closely. A bunch of photos were provided. We certainly don't do an aerial access. Certainly no need to, because of the amount of information provided by Mr. Leggett. I don't know if binoculars were used by our staff. It's possible, but again, everything that was pointed out in the reports is visually accessible from the ground, more or less. So, we agree with the assessment of the tree with a larger cavity, system of cavities. And to a certain degree, we're not disagreeing with Mr. Leggett's assessment that the tree that we denied at the staff level I think his assessment of it being moderate at the moment, but becoming, as he stated, more of a high risk is a reasonable statement. These are very mature, very old, tall palms, and I think his testimony, I don't have anything to really say to counter that. It's really reasonable testimony. These are the things that we're evaluating as arborists is, hey, how strong is that palm? You know, trees need to move in the wind. You know, that's a survival technique. But understandably, when they're that tall and they're swinging that much, we understand that sense of security can be a real factor for that immediate those neighbors. So that's a little bit about kind of how we assess them, and you know, I think it's a robust dialogue about a very important situation.
Okay, very good. So I see no one else speakers, so we'll close this item and move on to the next one. We're on item number 7, order number 203533 at 366 San Carlos Street.
Great, thank you. Chris Buck again with Public Works, Bureau of Urban Forestry. And I always like to just announce who I am in case someone's joined us midway through. So let me pull up our set of slides from this PowerPoint. So yes, we're looking at this item, 366 San Carlos, to consider the removal of 2 palm trees, also significant on private property. In this case, it would be removal of 2 without replacement due to a lack of space. Our staff approved the removal and the public protested. Here's an image of the palm trees. In this case, these are Mexican fan palms, which is a little different from the palms we were just talking about. Skinnier, sometimes even, if not taller, just as tall. We received an application for removal from the property owner, permit application 785157. And the reasons for removal stated on the application from the property owner, primarily other reasons, but tree 1, damage to the stairwell, and tree number 2, the need to replace the sewer lateral that serves the home. Here's an image of the 2 trees as they are situated on the site. There is a street tree adjacent to the property, which is just cropped out of view to the right. I have another image of that. This shows the 2 trees. The tree on the right, closest to the main stairway to the home, will show photos of that and what the conflict is there. The tree on the left does sit right above their sewer lateral, and we'll show an image of that. So the image of the palm on the left, you can see this sort of 5 by 5 inch perforated metal vent is the sewer lateral vent. And you can see there's a sort of a quote unquote tradesman's door or side access between the homes. So the sewer line is running right below the palm, and the property owner has applied to remove the tree to make repairs to that sewer line. Here's an image of the 2 palms. I pulled this one up on Google Street View just to show the existing street tree. This is a Gladitia triacanthos, I believe. It's a honey locust. It's not dead. It's just this image was taken in the wintertime in 2015 by Google. So there is an existing street tree, but this shows the palms themselves in proximity to the home. Overall, the real issues here are what's occurring on the ground. They do just have enough space from the facade of the building. I didn't see any issues in the inspector's notes about that. The fronds, or this quote unquote skirt of fronds, could be pruned off and removed to get sort of better clearance from the facade itself. But digging into the real issues here, this one is pretty straightforward. It's reasonable to expect an owner to have full access to their stairway. So this is the palm on the right. number one. So at the staff level, again, it seems odd, but we were kind of torn about what to do with this one. But it is causing damage below that stairway. So even if you had a willing homeowner who just loved their palm and wanted to keep it forever, you do have this issue, which is the damage to the stairway. And that's what we're looking at below the stairway. You can see this sort of mat of fibrous roots that are coming up through the cement that forms the stairway, and also breaking up the bricks on the right in this image. And that's the palm on the right. Again, the palm on the left is on top of the sewer line. It's causing some sidewalk damage, but it's really its location on top of the sewer line would really be pretty challenging to make the sewer line repair. There can be cal OSHA issues when you excavate in there. Even if you were trying to tunnel below that palm, that can be a real public safety issue to the people performing that work. So they're, again, amazing asset to the block. You can see there's a palm down the street that's planted in the sidewalk. In this particular case, we were a little torn about it, but we felt that the tree really impacting the stairway could be approved at the staff level due to that property damage and the block of access to their stairs, as well as the palm on the left. Unfortunately, the location above the sewer line and their need to repair the sewer line were the issues and the reasons that we approved these at the staff level. So these would be removal without replacement, because both sites are really not big enough to accommodate a mature tree that we would typically require. There's just not enough room. So this was removal without replacement of 2 palms, significant trees on private property, and it was protested during the public notification period.
Okay, very good. Are there any speakers on this item? Would anyone like to speak on this item? I'm not seeing any. No hands raised. Okay. Also, I just want to acknowledge Mr. Clip was kind enough to do some background on the Zoom. And apparently I don't believe that we have a toll-free number, but there is a number, the 669 number, I believe, is probably the closest, and is a San Jose area code. So depending on your phone service, it could be a toll call. The 669 number is a San Jose area code. And I know that the Public Works staff is researching the other matter. So again, I see no hands raised on this matter. So hearing none, or seeing none, I will close that. And we'll move on to the next item, which is item number 8 on the agenda. It's order number 203-534, 801 Sanchez Street, to consider removal of 2 significant trees on private property with replacement. Staff has approved the removal and the public has protested. Go ahead, Chris, you're up, okay.
There we go. Thank you. Chris Buck with Public Works, Bureau of Urban Forestry. I'm going to present information about this application. This is application for the removal of another example of 2 significant trees that are located on private property. It's removal of 2 trees with replacement. And at the staff level, we approved the 2 trees for removal, and the public has protested. And so looking at the image of the site, this is 801 Sanchez, permit application 785-187. The removal of 2 significant trees due to construction activities. Overall, what's happening on the site is that the house is being demolished and a new home is being constructed. We have some good visuals to try to guide you on what the 2 subject trees are and where they're located. And so here's the site. It's a rather dramatic site, actually. One of the trees is an olive tree located high above the retaining wall in the middle of the image that you can see here. The second tree is a Victorian box tree, or Pittosporum undulatum, and that's above the stairway there on the left with the left arrow. The tree on the far left is a Monterey pine tree, and that tree would remain and be protected on site during construction. So I've got some notes that our inspector who evaluated this application has provided for us. So notes on the olive tree, either from the inspector or the architect, is that the olive tree conflicts with the proposed building foundation wall. Excavation for shoring, concrete wall forming, and waterproofing will be too close to the tree trunk to allow for proper protection. The next tree, Pittosporum or Pittosporum tree, this tree conflicts with proposed reinforcement of existing north perimeter retaining wall. Excavation and concrete wall forming will be too close to the tree trunk to allow for proper protection. The tree conflicts with the proposed building foundation. Looks like that's just a repeat. Yeah, so that's just a typo there. Those are the issues as stated. Here's a look at the Pittosporum tree. The structure itself is kind of poor, but it's been maintained as a relatively smallish tree, so that hasn't become a public safety issue. But you can see there's some reduced vigor in the image on the left. It really should look vigorous and healthy year-round. This species is experiencing decline in the last 5 to 6 years. It's not pinpointed, but it's likely due to sort of the pattern of drought that California has been experiencing over the last 10 years or so. It is located, as you can see, right along the existing sidewalk foundation. The olive tree is pictured here. I will note that on the left, you can see this image. There's actually a lot of decline. What I mean by decline is the tree should really look pretty green and vigorous and healthy looking year round. It's a broadleaf evergreen species. And so this actually is has poor vigor, fair structure. So the two trees themselves are, they have some issues. They're not thriving and vigorous. Overall, the project team and the project proposes to replace both trees, both significant trees. So there will be room to replant significant trees that would become potentially significant in the future and would be planted as such as part of the project. And so it'd be future trees that need to remain so that they can achieve the size criteria to become a protected tree again in the future. Projects, when there's a brand new building, it triggers a planting code that requires that trees be planted along the public right-of-way. And so based on the plans, our urban forestry inspector has reviewed that there's room on the back of the sidewalk to require replacement trees. And so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 street trees, new street trees would be planted along the Sanchez frontage. And although a couple of those would be within 25 feet of the approach of an intersection, because they're located at the back of sidewalk, we can demonstrate flexibility with that guideline that says no tree within 25 feet because it's not in the sidewalk, the developed sidewalk. So there's no visibility issue to motorists as they approach that intersection. But based on the condition of the trees, we felt that it was reasonable to approve the trees for removal. I do want to point out that there are times when we will stick up and fight for retaining trees that are in private property that are in a conflict with proposed development, but it really needs to be a pretty outstanding tree that we feel firmly as a bureau where we would direct someone, no, you need to work around that tree and alter the project in some dramatic way. Unfortunately, these two trees are not in good enough condition for us to kind of, really lay ourselves, out in that dramatic fashion to say you need to retain these. So based on their poor vigor, the ability for them to replace them, and also the new row of street trees, at the staff level, we did approve the removal of the 2 significant trees. And then just to review, we approved the removal, and during the notification period, the public protested. And I don't have the replacement species handy, but I believe the applicant would likely have that available.
So for the 6 street trees.
For the 6 street trees and significant trees, it's been discussed at length with our inspector who's processed the application. And I just need to do a better job of making sure I have that handy.
Well, that's on the landscape plan. It says it's going to have 2 40 to 48 inch box olives to replace the significant trees.
Thank you. Exactly. So that's what's planned for in property, and
Okay.
Also 6 new street trees.
Okay, very good. Okay, so at this point, are there any speakers? I don't see anyone's hand up, but let me give it a moment. Oh, there's one. Mr. Kent Hip. So, sir, I'm going to allow you to speak. Go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Kent Hip. I'm with Andrea Cochran Landscape Architecture. We're the landscape architects for the project.
Okay, Andrea Cochran. Okay. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chris. That was a great introduction for the project for us, and it was very thorough. So I don't have very much to add, but one thing I wanted to say was that the olive tree, our understanding of the existing olive tree is that it's a fruiting species, and so there's some fruit that's coming down on the sidewalk below, and so what we're proposing with our replacement trees would be a 48-inch box with a Swan Hill or other non-fruiting variety, so that there's not a fruit coming down to the sidewalk below.
Okay. Sir, just out of curiosity, can you speak to the 6 street trees, what they will be?
I think we're also planning for those to be olive trees as well.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other speakers on this item? Any other speakers? All right. Seeing none, I'll close this item and we'll move on to the next item. That was Sanchez. So we're on item number 9. And so this is order number 203535 at 2555 Diamond Street to consider removal of 1 street tree with replacement of a 25-foot red maple. Staff approved the removal and the public has protested.
Thank you. Chris Buck with Urban Forestry, and we'll present our case in a moment once I get my screen up. Hold on. So we have an application for removal, and this one is also construction related. We'll pull up the PowerPoint in a moment. Thanks for waiting. So this is regarding the removal of 1 street tree with replacement. And every case is always a little different. In this matter,
PowerPoint's not up.
Oh, what's that? Hold on. Oh, let me go to share screen.
Great, it's up. Thank you.
You're good.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So the subject tree is a mature or young to medium mature Brisbane box tree. The reason for removal stated on the application is that it's conflicting with the new driveway location. we'll get into that in far greater detail. It's application number 785184, adjacent to 2555 Diamond Street. And I do want to call your attention. This is the one that we caught was there was a spacing typo on the agenda. So I just wanted to again clarify that. We've caught that on the agenda item for those following along. So at the staff level, we really typically fight to retain street trees. And one reason that street trees are often applied to be removed is when someone doesn't have an existing garage but wish to try to install one. And those are challenging cases because we really want to see a mature tree remain. In this particular case, there's an existing home with an existing driveway. So the application isn't for a home that's never had one before. You know, they've had a driveway. And we'll go into greater detail on that. But essentially, the Planning Commission has approved the building design, and that was approved prior to our Bureau reviewing the project. And so to some degree, this has forced the approval of the tree removal permit at the staff level within the Bureau of Urban Forestry. So the project application is that they are going to demolish the existing building, and the site plans show how a planned new driveway cannot be offset, meaning shifted one way or the other to save or work around the existing tree. And so we have a diagram here showing top and bottom proposed new location of the driveway. And then down below, I will zoom in into another screen to show some work's been done to, you know, just look at all possibilities. Like, could this tree remain if the building is built as approved by Planning Commission? And the answer really is not really. And so I know the applicant has a far better resolution diagram than this is, but we have all the details here. So that was the conflict. And what's proposed is that the new driveway would be on the downhill side. The replacement tree would be placed on the uphill side. Our staff took a very close, hard look at the placement of utilities in the sidewalk after project completion. And it does look that there is space that can be preserved to allow the planting of a replacement tree. And I do want to note that one of the issues with why a driveway and a doorway have to go on a certain side of the property is that there's a minimum interior landing dimensions that they need to achieve. Again, that's typically not something that we get into details on, but that's the reason. The project applicant has contracted with Moon Valley Nursery to purchase a 25-foot tall red maple pictured here. So at the urban forestry staff level, we certainly did talk at staff level about, you know, a desire to retain the tree. If the project's approved, then what can they do to offset the loss of a mature tree? This is a pretty large, that looks like either a 48 or a 60-inch box size tree. It probably states on this invoice here. It's not jumping out at me, the exact size, but it's a good size tree. But at the staff level, we felt our hands were a bit tied with a project that's been, you know, approved by the Planning Commission. So we approved the removal of that, and the public protested. So this is removal of one Brisbane box tree with replacement with the 25-foot tall red maple due to construction and the relocation of the garage and driveway. Thank you.
All right, very good. I see one person that's would like to speak, Mr. Ford, Michael Ford. You can speak, please, sir.
Yes. So I was told that I would be able to share my screen, but I think I can probably talk around the reasons for this tree removal without sharing, if that's.
You could be promoted to panelist and share if you wish.
That would be great if you don't mind.
Thank you.
Okay, we can see your screen, I believe, sir.
Yeah, you can go ahead now.
Mr. Ford?
Mr. Ford.
Oh, here we go. Sorry, I had to re-unmute myself after
That's
being
okay.
mute.
We're all
So
learning.
are you, yeah, yes, we are. So are you seeing a PDF presentation of the front elevation and the sidewalk plan?
I see a street replacement. Somebody else is sharing right now.
Yeah, that's what it looks like to me. Let me try. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So now you should be able to see my screen.
There we go.
Yes. Okay. So I think that I apologize. I've forgotten your name. The DPW staff did a great job of discussing how we arrived at the streetscape and the reason for relocating the street tree. What I think is a little bit unclear is what's going on inside the building that necessitated that. This is a multi-generational family house with room for not just the owners and their children to live, but also their parents. So looking at the front elevation and on the uphill side front door, we worked in close coordination with the planning department to make sure that we could have an in-law suite or a sort of a parent suite on the ground level that coordinated with the rooms down policy and didn't conflict with the ADU policy to make sure that we could create a multi-generational household on this site. So one of the things that needed to be done for that was separating the window that provides light and air to that downstairs suite from the front entry door. So you can see on the uphill side, there's the entry door, and on the downhill side, there's the window that goes into that suite. Because we had to separate these two things, it necessitated that the garage be placed at the center of the lot. So with the street tree sort of existing at the existing center of the lot, we had to relocate it in order to meet the programmatic requirements for this and to provide a multifamily household. So as was mentioned, planning has already approved this project, and if we were to have to maintain the street tree, it would require significant change to the massing that would not only reduce the livable area of the proposed building, but also add months and maybe a year of review to the project. We decided to go ahead and volunteer with, like, prior to being asked to replace the existing tree with a tree of equal or greater height and of equal or greater maturity, and a tree of an appropriate species that was referenced off of the Bureau of Urban Forestry's desired species list. And we, like was mentioned, we've contracted with Moon Valley Nursery to provide the tree. They will professionally plant the tree and guarantee its sort of establishment in the first several months of its life to make sure that it starts to thrive on the site. So with that, I will unshare.
Very good. Mr. Ford, let me just ask are you the project architect or?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'm the project architect with Peter's Design Build, so we're also the contractor.
Great, thank you very much. All right,
Absolutely.
Are there any other speakers on this item? I see one hand up. Mr. Clip, I think I've allowed you to speak. You have to unmute though.
Yep.
Okay.
I just actually have a question for Bureau of Urban Forestry. I'm wondering if the homeowners have been fully apprised of what it takes to make sure that a tree of that size establishes and succeeds.
Okay, I'll see if Chris wants to respond now or not. Chris, do you want to?
Sure, that's Chris Buck with Public Works, Bureau of Urban Forestry. I know that, I believe it's Stephen Keller who's been involved with this application. And so that's sometimes one reason why you can't plant much larger than that, because there's just physically not enough space to get all that root mass back into the sidewalk. So we have reviewed it very closely. And, you know, this is the kind of case where often we need to go to Board of Appeals to get an applicant to agree to plant something of this stature. So Steve has really done that. Well, again, to be fair, I think the applicant may have approached us with that. So to give them some credit, we would have asked the same to say, look, this is what we're going to really be talking about here. So we do believe it's feasible, and Steve Keller made sure they showed plans with the utilities where they'd be going specifically in the sidewalk to ensure that there's space for a tree of that size to be planted there. So we really feel like we've vetted this one very closely to make sure that that is absolutely the case.
Okay. Let me see, any other speakers, questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so I will thank all the speakers on this matter. I will close this item. We'll move on to the next one. It's item number 10, order number 203536, 161 28th Avenue. Consider removal of 2 street trees with replacement. Staff approved the removal and the public has protested.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Chris Buck with Public Works, Bureau of Urban Forestry. The subject trees are adjacent to 161 28th Avenue, and we'll go through and show some images of the site. And just a moment, my PowerPoint's acting up a little bit on me. Yes, here we go. So the 2 subject trees are Acacia melanoxylon, also known as Blackwood acacia. And these are the same species that we saw on 3rd Street, adjacent to 3rd and Evans in the Bayview. It's a species that we still have a lot of in San Francisco. It's a really fast growing species, so it's a pretty popular tree to plant back in the day. These specific trees have some pretty significant issues with them. So there were 3 trees adjacent to this property. Sidewalk was repaired, and not surprisingly, failures occurred. So tree 1 has already failed due to a total root failure. And you can see there's fresh concrete and sidewalk repairs made to the site. And so we're really concerned about these trees as well. Not just concerned, but when we initiated these trees for removal, we didn't use our typical 30-day posting, which is to say, look, we're initiating removal, or the applicant is initiating removal. This is actually a real public safety concern. And so we have a 15-day hazard tree notice, which is amazingly still can be protested by the public. What we see in these images is actual separation. It's actually a root failure that's beginning to occur already. And so we really want to get this case here before you so that we can move forward on the removal, but we did receive protests. So we have root heaving. What this is showing is the separation of the root system from the surrounding soil. And that's occurring on several sides of the tree. Again, tree 1 has already failed. These trees also years and years ago were topped or excessively pruned. The city issues fines for when trees are excessively pruned. It's a terrible practice. And we really try to educate the public on not doing that, especially now that the city has all the maintenance responsibility for street trees. There's really no reason for a property owner to hire their own contractor to prune a tree. And if they do, it should be a professional. So these trees were pruned not by a professional years ago. There's a lot of decay in the main stems of the tree that extends throughout the main stems and where they join. The last tree of the 2 here has a very large decay conch a lot of structural issues here. This is a tree that really needs to be removed. Both of these trees need to be removed. The remaining structure on this tree is extremely poor and prone to fail. Again, showing the upper canopy. These are two trees with literally no future, and we really need to get these trees removed. We did post them with a 15-day hazard notice, but we were not able to prevail upon the member of the public who protested to withdraw their appeal. We generally never discourage, well, Mr. Carnes pointed out earlier, sometimes we call to provide additional information to educate and see if a protest would be reconsidered. So I don't want to say never, but we treasure the ability of the public to protest. In this particular case, we felt that showing these images would have convinced the protester otherwise, meaning that the trees really need to be removed. So with that said, we initiated removal and they can be replaced. There were a total of 3 trees. There's room realistically to provide 2 trees because the trees were planted much too close together before. And when we plant trees, we really want to plant trees to manage them with their anticipated mature size. And as you can see here, these trees are much too, it may look fine to the lay person, but these trees are still really young and just getting going, and they don't have enough room between each other. So where there were 3 trees, we will replace with 2 replacement trees that are also large stature trees at maturity. But again, it was protested during a 15-day notification period. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I see one person with their hand up. So Kristen Bassey, you've got the floor.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. Hi, my name is Kristen Bassey, and I live at 161 28th Avenue with my husband, my 3.5-year-old son, and my 2-year-old daughter. And we really loved the 3 mature acacia trees, lining the street in front of our home, and we really value them from a privacy perspective. But then in January, during a windstorm, the tree to the north came crashing down at about 3 a.m. and it crossed the sidewalk, crushing our wooden fence, our front gate, and our front yard trees. And we were so fortunate that the tree didn't hit anyone on the sidewalk or anyone in their car, and that it didn't hit us walking in and out of our home. And then when the Department of Public Works and the Urban Forestry inspectors came out to assess the situation, much like Mr. Buck stated previously, they determined that it wasn't a matter of if the 2 other trees would fall, but just a matter of when. And this is an extreme safety issue for us. And these trees need to come down purely out of the safety of my family and my young children and my neighbors' young children. And directly adjacent to the 3rd tree to the south is also an elementary school bus stop. And that means that young children and their families are waiting on that sidewalk underneath these trees morning and afternoon every single school day. And as much as I loved the trees before, this is an absolute public safety issue and a significant issue for my family and our home. And, they will be replaced with beautiful, harmonious trees that we hope to keep thriving for decades to come. But I appreciate your time in considering this, and I trust you'll make the right decision with the safety of my children in mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for taking the time and your patience for waiting to the end. Mr. Clip, I see your hand is up. I think you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Goldberg. I would be remiss if I did. Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you.
Okay, great.
I thought I pushed the wrong button. I apologize.
Yeah, it's been a long night.
Well, I apologize if I apologize.
No. We're all good. I just want to say I would be remiss if I did not thank the Bureau of Urban Forestry for improving the meeting's digital platform. As you mentioned, Mr. Goldberg, the previous meetings on Microsoft Teams were incredibly challenging at best, and I really deeply appreciate the department's responsiveness to my statements about that. and reaching out to them about that and making sure, and I wanted to make sure that this hearing didn't end without making that acknowledgement.
Well, thank you, sir. I mean, your comments last time were heard. They were justified.
They were strong. And then just a couple of questions on this removal. Chris mentioned that topping is fined, and that these trees have been very badly topped. I'm wondering if there were any fines issued for that. And then in terms of the replacement, when exactly that will be done? And those are just my questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I'll see if Chris would like to respond.
Thank you, Chris with Urban Forestry, and thank you, Mr. Clip. We appreciate the positive feedback. I think it really makes sense for us to use this platform. It's also the platform that Board of Appeals uses. And so in that sense, for folks that are kind of in our pipeline, hopefully, we have a day where we don't need you to be in a pipeline, but it makes sense for us. So I appreciate the positive feedback. Even with that said, there's still a few glitches, and we'll continue to work those out. So regarding the fine, I can look that up, but we do issue, and for the public's benefit, we do issue fines on a regular basis for excessive pruning, but it's been a long time. So it's not, I would say I don't even see signs that these trees have been topped in the last 10 years. It's been that long ago. And then typically, our advice attorney for topping, we really typically need to try to issue a fine within about a year of that, just for it to be kind of relevant. So in that sense, these trees those injuries occurred far too long ago for us to issue a fine at this point in time. But it's noted, and we certainly are increasing our education and our outreach. We even have a tree care school, just like, you can go to driving school to try to reduce your penalties, to try to really use education over, use the carrot over the stick. So in terms of replacement trees, that's a great question. So right now we do have limited funds for replacement trees, and it often will involve our inspector obviously building relationship with the applicant or the adjacent property owner. In this case, it's not an applicant, it's just the adjacent property owner. So what we could do, I'm just thinking out loud, is perhaps any recommendation here, we could include information about what conversations have occurred about replacement and whether or not we believe these will be planted either by Public Works or through a combination of efforts involving the homeowner with, for example, Friends of the Urban Forest. I think that's information that we can provide for the hearing officer to include in a possible recommendation.
Very good. Yeah. So we don't have what street trees will be replaced. We just could have that.
I need to bring that with me, so to speak. I don't have it right in front of me, but I do know that that's something the inspector has been working on with the adjacent owner.
Okay, very good. Are there any other questions? Anyone else have their hand raised? I don't see any. So we'll move to the last item on the agenda. Item number 11, order number 203537, 646th Avenue, to consider removal of one street tree with replacement adjacent to 5455 Anza Street. Staff approved the removal and the public has protested.
Thank you. This is Chris Buck with Public Works, Bureau of Urban Forestry. And to confirm, we have the removal of one street tree with replacement adjacent to 5455 Anza Street. This is a corner property at 46th Avenue. And here's an image of the subject tree. It's a Monterey cypress, kind of picturesque to some degree, but also problematic in terms of what we're dealing with at the ground level. So the issue here is really less one of the structure of the tree, although it's really around this utility pole quite a bit. Our concern in this case is not electrical hazard, but rather the nature of the repairs. So we did a temporary patch to make this safe so that we could go through this hearing process. And folks out there have been pretty patient with us because I'm looking at the dates from our inspectors' photos, and they go back 10 months, 10 to 11 months. So the subject tree is a Monterey cypress. My hunch is that this seeded itself right there, and through whimsy and probably neglect, the tree established itself. And at a certain point, the homeowner said, well, it's there now, let's just keep it. The challenge for us is the amount of sidewalk repair we need to make these sidewalk repairs. We need to cut roots to make this happen. There isn't a way for us at this site to work around or avoid cutting these roots. And so that's the challenge. That was the reason for removal when we initiated removal. We also did remove a pine tree downhill from this that was at the back of sidewalk that we are also going to replant. So this is removal of one, but ultimately we also removed another tree at this site and we'll replant both of them. We're going to shift the locations a little bit to make it work with the intersection approach and the stop signs. But we will plant 2 street trees at curb after these trees are removed. And that would be within 6 months after removal. But that's basically the staff presentation for this particular case. And we did receive a protest from the public during the public notification period. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any hands raised. So, I see one. Mr. Clip, I think I've unmuted you. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a question. And again, if Chris wants to answer it or not, I'll totally up to him. I was just curious if there had been any sort of evaluation of whether that's the maximum amount of trees that can be planted along that route. Those are a couple pretty big trees to take down and a lot of, eco benefits. And I'm just curious to know if there's been any sort of look at it from that perspective to see if there's, it can be more than a 1-for-1 or anything like that.
Okay, let me see if Mr. Buck would like to respond.
Sure, that's a great question. I was conversing with our inspector earlier this evening to say, it's this one tree, but I know there's a pine tree there, so now that's removal of 2. That's something we can look into. We generally stick to, relatively speaking, the immediate adjacent frontage. Those are a couple substantial trees. Whether or not they were the best tree for that site, kind of besides the point. They were there, and it's a loss of canopy. So I can look into that and see if there is an ability to go beyond the 2 replacement trees. That's something we can take a quick look at, and perhaps we could forward that information, Mr. Goldberg, to you. That could make it into a possible recommendation.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Okay, so that ends our agenda. Let me simply ask, is there anything that we've forgotten that anyone wants to add to this somewhat lengthy hearing? And if not, let me thank all the attendees and panelists for your patience as we work through this. And I know that Chris and the people at Buff are interested in any feedback that you have in any way that this process can be improved. So please feel free to do that. That they took to heart your suggestions from the last time. Again, the way this will happen is I'll complete my recommendations to the director. The director will then review them, approve, disapprove, change, modify, whatever, and then folks will be notified. And as a reminder, this was being taped, so if there's a need or an interest of somebody to get a copy, that is possible. So with that, we'll conclude the hearing. And again, thank you very much, and stay safe.
Hi, Layla.
Hi. Hello.
So we survived.
You should end recording.
Okay, good. I was trying to figure out what I was doing wrong.
Yeah, stop recording so you know.